G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to talk about chambering a rifle, and I'm talking about things, I suppose I would go straight up front and say, listen, as much as I'm a gunsmith, I use good gunsmiths to do the chambering generally. I can do a little bit myself, but I don't have the equipment to do it. And I really want to put this more forward to the rifleman's perspective, as someone who's getting a gun done, rather than trying to get too much into the technical details as to what should be done, and that'll make a bit more sense as what we go forward with. Okay, so to start off with, we're talking about you've got a rifle that you've shot already, and you've used a lot. You're putting a new barrel in it. You've got, because it's worn out, or you're changing the caliber. You want to improve it or change it to a different one, because of all the reasons that you have, and we've been through in various forms as to choosing a cartridge or a caliber to suit whatever you're doing. And I will do more videos like that for people who want to ask those questions and trying to make sense of that sort of stuff, but we're not getting to that at the moment. You are, for whatever reason, or building a completely custom rifle, and you are getting this barrel done, you want to get it done to make it work as well as you can for what you want. And what I'd say, there's the absolute first thing, or the highest priority, the best result is going to end up by finding the right person to do it. Now, truth be told, gunsmiths are not all the same, which is obvious, but for some I don't think it is. If it's a gunsmith, they can do this. Listen, that's not the case. I suppose in the ideal world, yes, they'd all be exactly the same, they'd all do exactly the same thing. In the practical world, the same as my job, which I really do, which is a mechanic, a performance mechanic, I say the same thing to people there. The first thing you really have to work at, where you should really do your research, along with working out what cartridge you want, working out little bits and pieces about what you want, is you want to find a good gunsmith. You want to find someone that either has done a lot of these and they work really well with really good reports, or someone that has done does a very good job at what they do, and will help with the research and that sort of stuff. But basically, that's a very, very important part of an important ingredient in this conversation. Not just their knowledge, not just the equipment they have, which is also relevant, what reams and things they have for what chamberings they can offer, that sort of stuff. But also the way they work their equipment. There are flush-through systems. There are different levels of expertise, different levels of equipment, different levels of knowledge that come with your gunsmith. So finding a good gunsmith is super, super important to that equation. So that's enough said on that, but it is a very important point for the not that flashy gunsmith with not that great a reputation. Pick up your game. In the real sense, the good guys, they deserve the work and they are worthwhile using, because it does matter. Down to the finish of the chamber, down to the design of the whole of the choices you've got inside there, and I'll get a bit more into what we're talking about there. Now, as said, go with your gunsmith's lead, but there is various choices. One ream is, like I just did, the last I did was this one here, which is the 300 rum, where you just want a 300 rum ream, don't you? And it all happens. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. There is, to start off with, the condition, the quality, how it's been used, all that sort of stuff is one of the features. If you are the first kid off the block or buying your own ream to do the chambering on this rifle, then there's some details. There are different reams, there are different choices. There's match reams, and then there's ones that are set up and designed with slight quirks and differences in them, even when you're talking about a standard SAMI chamber. So there's a little bit of understanding to there. Like I said, you follow your gunsmith lead. That's why you use a good gunsmith to do that sort of stuff, but you certainly do that. Another feature which some people think can do that happen, but really can't, and that is, I have a 308 that's got a good heavy barrel. It's 26 inches long, and I'm going to ream it out and buy myself a ream and ream it out to get it out to a 300 Win Mag or a 300 rum or something like that. And that'll take out the wear in the throat because it goes in further. And in practice, that sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Not really. The truth of it is that the metal in a barrel changes when it gets fired. We all know that it wears, But the other thing it's doing is it's hardening, especially at the beginning of the throat, especially right at the end of the chamber. It gets a lot harder. So to try and ream them out, as much as it is done sometimes and is sort of conceivable, it's really hard on everything. And when you really come down to the cost of a barrel, it's, listen, much more a band-aid solution, which might end up with an okay result with a very hard way of getting there, but it's not the ideal path by any means whatsoever. A new barrels aren't that expensive in the scheme of things. So starting fresh is generally a smarter move. And really, like I said, I'm not the expert on that sort of stuff, but in speaking to good gunsmiths, we're really talking about once you're past the sort of 200, 300, 500 rounds, you've got a lot of hardening there. So you're going to make a ream, you're going to make a machine, you're going to make everything work a lot harder and potentially end up with either more damage to equipment or a worse job of actually doing that chambering. So ideally a new barrel on that front. As said, do the research into what the chamber is to make sense of it, and then we'll take the next step. Now, my honest opinion of the situation is that I don't care too much as long as it's a good chamber that has worked, it's a good ream, and it has worked and there hasn't been any issues with it. And that's, once again, what your gunsmith is going to be able to tell you. You know, this one here, this chamber works well. I tend to find that the customers that take this have some issues with sticking brass and that sort of stuff. There is that type of thing that happens. In most cases, they don't have the direct feedback. And in most cases, if you start speaking to good gunsmiths, you'll find that a lot of the trouble they have in dealing with trouble rifles is where chambers have been done in less than perfect conditions. So some factory side of things, the way the factory's done is a little score or something other in it. In some gunsmith shops, they're just not as clean. There's a little more scoring, a little more scruffiness, and that can cause issues with not so much performance, not so much accuracy. That's rarely a problem unless it's not centered perfectly, and that's another whole conversation. But once again, good gunsmith, but more in just the wrong score at the wrong place, just past the shoulder, where just a tiny bit of a chip's gone in there, put a tiny bit of a score into it, that can cause it where the brass wants to stick. The polishing the chamber and trying to get around to try and make things smoother, if there's any slight little bells and things made out of the wrong practices or the wrong processes, that can cause, once again, brass that you really got to run along lower pressures. Once you start to get up in your high pressures, the brass won't come out. There's those sort of issues. All comes back into that gunsmith conversation. But beyond that, pretty good chamber. It's a good ream. It works well. It cuts nicely. It's got some good shapes to it. That's all that really matters to me and when I'm picking one. So in this case, with the 300 rum, it was a match chamber ream, and he already had it. So it was pretty simple and straightforward to go through and put it in there, all set up, does a beautiful job, has a flush through system. Barrel was a Krieger barrel, cut up really nice. It cut really nicely, so that'll work really well. All wonderful. The next bit, which I suppose I'm really doing this about, is the conversation of how far do you throat it forward? For those that don't understand, what are we talking about there? Well, a standard chamber, and especially the likes of match chamber, in most cases, chambers, especially of the older style cartridges and things prior to the last 10 years, different for 6.5 Creedmoors and that sort of stuff, they tend to be throated out for heavier bullets. But what am I talking about? Well, if you have a bullet case, there's a 308 bullet case, and here I have a couple of bullets. Now, okay, we take this long one. This is one that you wouldn't really run in a 308, but it's what I am running in the 300 rum. But when you put this into the bullet, you have a range of places it can actually go, from ridiculously a long way out to a ridiculously a long way in. Both those are mistakes, by the way, but in between is where it should be. But this changes, as you can see. The bullet has essentially a straight side, then the bullet starts to curve down. It's called the ogive of the bullet. And the barrel is got a hole down the middle of it, obviously, the bore, and it's got the rifling. Now the rifling doesn't let the bullet go in. It actually stops it when it hits the rifling. And that's talking about the lands, and there's some stuff I'll talk about there. But that point, your chamber's set up to be able to accept the brass, and then it has a throat area, and then the rifling starts. And that depicts where exactly you're going to put the bullet in the way of how far out or how far in it's going to sit. If it's too far out, the bullet won't go in. You try and jam it in, you'll push it back in there, or you'll jam it into the lands, you do something or other, which is not what you want to do. And equally, you don't want it way too far back so that the bullet has to go a long way before it touches the lands. Although it'll make good speed, the bullet is then got a lot of speed and potentially wibbling around and everything wrong. It's called the jump, but you want that to be at a set distance. So how do you make that decision? Now, in a match chamber, or the one we were using here, it was very short. The bullet would have been right back in like this, different brass obviously, but right back on this to make it work in the match chamber. And that's because, we'll take that bullet out, we'll put this little 175 grain bullet in. You see that's where it is, that's where it goes to. Here's an image that shows the difference basically, but it's right back in, so that's where it's working. And just putting this bullet in a normal place, even in the standard middle of the road place, it was a lot further forward. So you have to run your lands further forward. So your throat area has to be pushed forward, is essentially what we're talking about. So, how do you make that decision? How far does the throat go forward? And a lot of people are asking what that is. What's your combined overall length to try and work it out? What's the throat? How far do you push the throat forward? All that sort of stuff. The truth of it is, the way I do it is quite simple. I tend to be there to help with this sort of stuff, but it's stuff that you can ask your gunsmith to do as well. And that is that I sit down and I get myself a piece of brass that I'm going to use. It's part of the thing. I have a piece of brass, so I know what the piece of brass looks like. And I've already selected, and this is a very important ingredient in a few different fashions, I've already selected the bullet range I want to use. If you have other ingredients, like if you want to do everything with this, well, you're going to have a compromise. You end up with your long bullets running short back in so that your short bullets can go back out. But you've also got twists in barrels and, listen, you've got to compromise. Largely, if you're doing things properly, this barrel, this rifle you're about to set up to do a particular sort of shooting, so it's going to use bullets in this range. So with this 300 rum, it's going to set up to be able to use the two bullets that I was planning on using in this, at this moment at least, are the 250 grain Hornady in the A-tip, which is sitting in there, and when they eventually come across the ocean, they're sitting in customs right now, that's the 245 grain Burgers. So both similar in their shape, very long bearing surface. That's talking about the flat part, that straight part of the bullet along the side there. Very long bearing surface and going to go a fair way forward. So I don't have those, I haven't even actually seen them, but I know by the mass of things they're going to be about the same. So that it also means I was running a particular twist. I'm running the minimum twist I can, so I'm in 1 and 9, but most people will be selecting a 1 and 8 or 1 and 8.5, that sort of stuff. So that's all done, the chamber's done, that sort of stuff. How am I going to get that to the right place? Well, as I said, I have a piece of brass, I have a bullet, and it's not much more complicated than I want to run it to where I don't want to push it right out. So I want that bearing surface to be sitting on the neck, in the neck. I don't want it to be protruding too far inside. So I want that whole bearing surface, so if you look at where your boat tail starts, that is, if you line that up pretty much with where the end of the neck is, well, that's largely it. I would tend to, as I did, fudge in by about 1 millimetre or about 40 thou. So fudge in, I'm not gaining anything out of pushing it that last little bit further and further forward. So I'll fudge in by about 1 millimetre, and then that ends up with a bullet that looks like that. There's still a fair bit out the front. It's pretty long. And because I've fudged in 1 millimetre, the combination between the two bullets, between those bullets I want to use, and it'll also accept some monolithics at that sort of level without having to go in too far, means that combination is going to work. So how do I get to that place? Well, as said, I've worked out the bullet, I put it to that, I do the measurements, I know that, put them together, the measurements, I've got a combined overall length of that, then that's real simple. Then I'm chambering. And I can then set up, and you can use the proper chambering mechanisms where Hornady do one, and I think probably Sinclair do one, but there's ways of checking to get to where your bullet's sitting. I do it much more simply than that, to be truthful. I just have a push-through rod, which is chopped off on the end so it's nice and square. I very carefully put it down inside the barrel, and then I measure where I put a bullet in there, very lightly touch the bullet up on the lands, and then I touch the rod up on here, and I mark my rod. I can see where that mark is, I know where I want it to be, and I move it forward till I get that combined overall length. To be truthful, 5 thou either side of that just doesn't matter. It's not going to change things. I then set it up. The next bit of my process is once I put it in the rifle and I shoot it, I get a rough idea where it's at, and then I run it for 100 rounds. See how it all goes, get everything settled down, start to work out a load and that sort of stuff, and then I go back and set that up more accurately to get a proper bullet jump, because then the lands are settled in, then I'm actually measuring it to exactly the right point. The lands comment that I mentioned I'd come back to, once again, a good gunsmith, most of them, I would say all of them do this. How are you moving that forward? I just pushed those lands forward, didn't I? Well, there's actually a proper little ream to do that. Proper little ream. There's all sorts of really nice ones. The one that Brett, my gunsmith, uses, a nice self-centering unit. It sets everything up. Does a lot of work to make sure everything stays very centered to the bore, not to the barrel, to the bore. So making sure that both chambering and the pushing the ream forward is to that sort of stuff. Set it all up, but there's a nice cutter, nice flush through, nice all those sort of bits and pieces, but there's also different angles of those reams. I tend to use a 1 degree, which is the lowest I know of, so it's a 1 degree, so it's only 1 degree of those lands coming in. There is, I think there's up to 3 degrees, so or probably even 5 degrees, where they are tighter angles on the lands to basically shorten things up and more aggressive grip and that sort of stuff. My logic is quite simple. Rather than, I prefer it to pick up as quickly as possible and gently as possible. So when the bullet goes bang, as I've explained lots of times, and I'm sure most people know, the bullet doesn't go instantly to 40,000 feet per second. It starts at 0 and has to accelerate. And that first little bit of the explosion is the slowest point of acceleration. So if it can pick up those lands smoothly, and then as it's accelerating, the lands are smoothly cutting in to the side of the bullet, then it runs down very nice. That's the nicest way I can do it. And I'm trying to create as little pressure spike and as smoother grip while having good traction on the bullet, all out of doing that sort of stuff. So listen, I think that's I suppose what I'm trying to put forward with that is this isn't complicated stuff. This isn't needing to copy someone else's information, needing to work out exactly what it is and that sort of thing. This should be done always to your gear. So you have the brass you're going to use. If you don't, get the brass you're going to use. You should have, in my mind, already made that mind up by the moment you decided to chamber in that place. You should have some brass sitting there. You should have some bullets sitting there. You should have this combination so you can do this stuff. Keep in mind that pushing that land forward, I have certainly done it after I've shot a few, but I've got that same amount of rounds. Really, I don't want to have shot 200 rounds and then asked to push that land forward, because I've hardened those lands. So I'm trying to do it in the first 20 to 50 rounds, 5 rounds, no rounds. I'm trying to do it before things have gone hard. So it's just nicer on the equipment. You end up with a nicer result of the rest of it. But you can do it that way as well, and I've certainly been there, where you get it all done and without being close enough and without doing this, you get it all done, get it home, put your bullet in, realise it's too short. Well, it's better to go to that effort and push it out earlier rather than later. But like I said, I should say there is time and the tyranny of distance and all that sort of stuff. It gets hard. The way I'm suggesting is quite simple. You have your brass, you have your bullet, you sit down and you work out where that gap is, work out where that distance is. With that, you can simply end up with a measurement. Take your time to measure it properly. As said, 5-10 thou doesn't really make a difference either way. Once you've got that ballpark, then you can start to get into it. And I suppose the other thing to keep in mind is if you have it all the way back in here, well, if you're magazine loading and that's what you're doing, I would ask to think about that, what you actually need to do with that. So you're running a PRS rifle, that sort of stuff. That's your overall length. There it is. It's your magazine. So then you're going to work your bullets and everything else to go with that. Then your chamber and everything is done to that overall length. If you're what I'm largely doing, precision long range shooting, there is no advantage to running the magazine. Apart from people who get annoyed by the fact you've got a magazine, why aren't you using it? That's it. Because other than that, you are really going out, you're doing this sort of shooting, you're getting onto target, you're practicing out that sort of stuff. You're almost certainly going to run 20, 25, maybe 50 rounds. Once you've reloaded a magazine and then put it in the gun so then you can load it into the gun, you're just wasting time putting that magazine bit in the middle. You may as well take the bullet out, put it in, load it. I like the fact that it doesn't damage bullet tips so much. It doesn't have to slide up the feed ramp. It's just going straight in. And like I said, I'm just taking a process out of the equation actually by not using the magazine. So to me, magazines are not relevant. For most of that sort of stuff, if the magazine is relevant, which we do set up for some guns, for some rifles, and some you have the choice as well. But in that case, the magazine is already depicting what length you're going with. In most cases, once we go with the 300 rum, with 3-3 Lapua, in most cases, once you go out to where you're using everything, magazines are running short. But I think that's a list of those bits and pieces. It would come back down to my overall of that is gunsmith, super, super important. Research, super, super important. As in all things, it's always about the combination that's going to end up with the best result. But I suppose that the last bit I would say is that for those people who want to know I need to know this because I need it to shoot like that, well, I haven't really seen them work that way. I've found that being a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, that sort of stuff in your combination doesn't really matter. Your jump really affects things, but the ballpark doesn't really. You know, you can have it in some cases, in the likes of that 30-06, you could have it to where it's, I could have gone probably another 2 millimeters further forward and really not seen much difference. I wasn't going to be able to run much more powder. I was going to be to that place. Even though I would have decompressed, I still got the same amount of bang going on inside that chamber. And I'm not really finding any other differences. The jump, yes, that's relevant, but that is relevant everywhere. And that is about the combination. So you jump, and that is also very specific to your particular bullet and your particular lands and your particular rifle. So something that, I suppose what I'm trying to say overall there is it's not that complicated. Some very simple measurements that you can do with your equipment to get to that place, and then push it forward to where it makes sense to things where you're in that nice happy spot to work. In situations like that 30-06 and like the 300 rum, to be truthful, both chambers that were made for running smaller bullets. As we go into these heavier bullets and longer bullets for our ELR precision type thing, then we're really throttling it forward to make sense of that bullet. It does leave the other bullets, the small bullets. You know, if I tried to run the 175 grain back in my rum chamber, it's just not going to work properly. It's not set up for that sort of stuff. But I don't want it to be either. Anyway, listen, always, other than that, I suppose there's two other things I'd say as I look forward here. This gang of bullets here is really just to show that there's a bit of thought put into this. There's a few times we might have played this game. It does also remind me of the wildcats, the custom chambers, the proper that sort of thing there. Listen, in some cases they're really good. You know, they have some really good results to them. Not always. There's some negatives attached to it. The type of thing that research is king in that world, where you do that through forums, through mates, through clubs, through good gunsmiths. But bigger isn't always better. More performance, pushing the boundaries isn't always a better thing. It sometimes can really wake something up. In other times, you get a good here, but you get a bad there. So it's something just to do your research on properly. Okay, I think that's about it. Listen, I hope that was worth people. For people that did like this stuff, please give us a thumbs up, like the video, it helps. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We would like to grow the channel, including sharing the videos and that sort of stuff, get more people into this team. We really appreciate all the growth and all the help we can get on that sort of score. And the last bit to go with that, I would like to point out to everyone, we are not a sponsored channel. We do this out of our own pocket and out of the help we get from our team, you guys. So if you can, and only if you can, please send us some love, send us some support. We have a few ways to do it now. We've set things up, taken some suggestions from people. We have our original setup, which you can go in our web store where we have products to help people with precision long-range products. So you can go in there, there's support bits you can get, so there's various ways you can do that for people who want to do that. There's our PayPal email is in the link below this description, so you want to go through and do it yourself. We have that sort of stuff there. And for people who would like the other bits and pieces, we have set up something. We will do more, so it's a little easier. But if you go to our channel page, so click on our icon and go to our channel page, you'll see in the banner, there's a PayPal icon in the corner of the banner. That cord, if you click on that, you'll see there is the ability to donate to us, the ability to turn it into a monthly subscription for those people that want to do that. But listen, I suppose anything that we get, we're very, very grateful for. We're very grateful for the views, the thumbs up, the subscribing, the moral support, and really hope that we're helping. And we're very, very appreciative for the help we get back. Anyway, guys, thanks for checking in on us, and we'll catch you next time.